He said it like a joke, but it split something inside me. Yeah, she begged to stay here. My son laughed and his friends laughed with him. Their voices carried through the house I had bought for him, the same house that once felt like my proudest gift. I stood in the doorway, holding a tray of lemonade, pretending not to hear. The glasses trembled slightly in my hands, the ice clinking against the sides like it knew something I didn't. Maybe silence was a blessing, because I wasn't ready to see the truth yet, that my love had turned into a punchline. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling fan, each slow turn slicing through the quiet. The air felt heavy, or maybe it was just me, heavy with memories, heavy with disappointment. At 73, I'd stopped expecting gratitude, but I never stopped hoping for respect. My son was everything I had worked for. Every shift I took, every dollar I saved, every meal I skipped, it all led to that moment when I handed him the house keys at his graduation dinner. His eyes had filled with tears then, and I had thought, this is what motherhood feels like, worth it. But that moment had faded. Now all I could hear was his laughter echoing from another room, turning my sacrifice into a story for amusement. They didn't know that house wasn't just a structure. It was 4 years of my life working 2 jobs, cashier by day, night cleaner by evening. It was my arthritic hands washing dishes at midnight and still writing encouraging notes to him for his exams. When he graduated from architecture school, I thought I had built him a foundation. But maybe all I built was entitlement. I had offered to stay only for a week. My apartment was under fumigation for mold. I even told him I could book a hotel nearby, but he insisted, "Stay here, Mom, it'll be nice." Those words had sounded warm then, but now they felt rehearsed, like something he said because he had to, not because he wanted to. I carried the lemonade to the backyard, where he sat surrounded by friends, young, ambitious, laughing about the world like they owned it. When he saw me, he smiled the way polite strangers do, not sons. "Thanks, Mom," he said, taking the tray. No one looked me in the eye. I sat quietly in the shade, listening to their easy conversations about projects, travel, investments, words that felt like another language to me. One of his friends, tall and smug, raised his drink and joked, "You've got a pretty sweet setup here, free house and home-cooked meals." My son grinned and said, "Well, you know, gotta keep the investors happy." They all laughed again. I did too, the kind of laugh that hides the sound of a breaking heart. Later, when they left, he came into the kitchen, scrolling through his phone. "I hope you weren't offended earlier," he said lightly. "You know how guys talk." I folded my towel, steady hands hiding the storm beneath. "What exactly did you mean when you said I begged to stay here?" I asked. He laughed again, careless, defensive. "Mom, come on, it's just talk. Just talk." As if words don't cut deeper than silence. I didn't reply. I just nodded and turned away, feeling something in me harden quietly, the part that had always forgiven him. That night, I sat by the window and looked at the house, the clean walls, the porch light glowing softly. I thought about all the years I spent building it brick by brick with hope. And for the first time, I realized something painful and clear. I had given him a home, but not humility. I had given him comfort, but not conscience. And as I stared into that quiet night, I knew the story wasn't over. Not yet. The next morning, the sun rose like nothing had happened, but something inside me had changed forever. I moved slowly through the kitchen, brewing coffee in silence, watching the light fall across the floorboards I'd once picked out myself. I remembered how proud I'd been when the contractor finished, how I'd walked barefoot across that same floor, whispering, "This will be his new beginning." Back then, every corner of this house had meant something sacred. But now, it just felt like proof that even love can be misplaced if it's given to someone who forgets where it came from. I'd bought this house not because I had to, but because I wanted him to have something I never did, stability. I was a single mother who never owned anything in her name until I was nearly 60. I knew what it was like to wake up to rent due, to fix a leaking roof that wasn't yours, to live one argument away from losing a home. So when my son graduated from architecture school, the first in our family to earn a degree, I wanted to give him a foundation no one could take from him. I'd spent 15 years saving, little by little, paycheck by paycheck. I still remember hiding $20 bills inside old recipe books so I wouldn't be tempted to use them for groceries. I worked weekends at the diner, late shifts at the motel front desk, even cleaned offices after hours when my back could barely hold me upright. And yet, every time I looked at his graduation photo, that smile, that cap tilted slightly to the side, it all felt worth it. I thought the house would be my way of saying, "You made it. We made it." When I handed him the keys, he'd hugged me tightly, his voice trembling as he said, "Mom, you didn't have to do this." I laughed through tears and told him, "Every home starts with respect. Promise me you'll remember that." He'd nodded, eyes shining. And for a while, I believed he would. But respect fades when pride grows too fast. Now, when I watched him move through that same kitchen, tall, successful, confident, I wondered if he ever thought about that moment. Or had it been swallowed by the noise of new friends, new jobs, and the shallow rhythm of approval he chased so easily? The kind of people who laughed with him, not for him. As I sipped my coffee, I thought about how love can turn invisible. You feed it, protect it, build with it, but one careless word can erase years of meaning. That's what hurt the most. Not the laughter, not the embarrassment, but the reminder that he no longer saw me as the woman who built his world. Just an old shadow in the corner of his success story. Later that day, I walked through the house alone. My fingers brushed over the walls, the framed photos, the little details I'd chosen. The curtains, the table, even the plants by the window. Everything had a story, a memory, a heartbeat. But he didn't see any of that. To him, it was just a house. And as I stood there, I realized something bitter but true. I had spent half my life giving, but never once asked if he'd learned how to value it. Maybe that was my mistake. Maybe love without boundaries isn't love, it's surrender. That evening, I packed my small suitcase again. Not to leave just yet, but as a quiet warning to myself, that if this house had lost its meaning, I wouldn't stay inside it waiting for him to find it again. Respect isn't taught with words. It's taught with absence. And soon he would learn what that meant. That evening, the house was loud again. Music playing, laughter spilling out from the deck, glasses clinking, a new set of friends filling the space I once called home. I stood in the kitchen, invisible, the smell of roasted chicken mixing with the scent of beer. They were celebrating something, I didn't ask what. These days, my questions felt like interruptions. I used to know every detail of his life. Now, I wasn't sure he even noticed when I left the room. I heard my name first, then my title. "Your mom's still here?" someone said, amused. "Yeah," he replied casually. "She's between places right now." Between places. I froze, dish towel in hand. Between places, like I was a stray drifting from home to home, not the woman who built his. His tone wasn't cruel, but it was careless, and sometimes carelessness hurts more than cruelty. The woman laughed. "You're sweet to let her stay." And then he said it, the same words that had broken me before. "Yeah, well, guilt does funny things." I didn't hear the rest. My hands were shaking too much. I turned off the tap, water dripping rhythmically into the sink. The sound felt like a clock counting down the seconds of my patience. My chest tightened, not with anger, but with disbelief. Guilt? That's what he thought this was? That I gifted him a house to ease my own conscience? I walked to the guest room quietly. My reflection in the mirror startled me, not because of my wrinkles or tired eyes, but because I didn't recognize the woman staring back. There was strength there, yes, but it had been buried under years of forgiveness. And tonight, that forgiveness felt used up. I sat on the bed, opened the drawer of my purse, and pulled out a worn brown folder, the one he'd never cared to read. Inside were all the documents, the deed, the transfer, and the trust papers. Legal words, small print, but I knew every line by heart. Because I'd read them over and over when I first signed them. When love was still pure and faith was still strong. I hadn't done it for protection back then. I'd done it for order, for responsibility. I never thought I'd use it as defense. Clause 43. Retained right of revocation in the event of personal disrespect or degradation. I traced the words with my finger. When the lawyer suggested adding it, I'd smiled and said, "It's just formality. He'd replied gently, "Sometimes formality becomes foresight." Tonight, I finally understood what he meant. I closed the folder and exhaled. My heartbeat slowed. It wasn't rage that filled me, it was clarity. For the first time, I wasn't thinking like a mother who wanted to be loved. I was thinking like a woman who deserved to be respected. He didn't come to check on me that night. Maybe he thought I was asleep. Maybe he didn't think at all. That used to hurt. Now it just confirmed what I already knew. Respect, once lost, is hard to find again. As I turned off the lamp, I whispered to myself, "You taught him everything, except how to treat you." The darkness didn't scare me. It comforted me. Because in that quiet, I made a decision. I wasn't going to argue, or plead, or cry. I'd spent a lifetime holding this family together with love. Now, I'd hold my dignity together with silence. Tomorrow, I would remind him, not with words, but with the weight of consequences he'd never imagined. The morning after that long, sleepless night, I sat on the porch with a cup of black coffee and the folder resting on my lap. The paper inside wasn't just ink and signatures. It was years of endurance, every signature proof that I'd planned for a day like this, though I never wanted it to come. The neighborhood was quiet except for the faint sound of sprinklers and a jogger's rhythmic steps echoing down the street. It was the kind of morning that looks peaceful to everyone else but feels like a storm inside your chest. He hadn't come out of his room yet. His shoes were by the door, the ones I'd bought him for his first job interview. I stared at them, remembering how proud I'd been that day. He'd walked out wearing hope on his face and gratitude in his eyes. But now he wore pride like armor, and pride is a dangerous thing. It doesn't let you see the people who helped you rise. I opened the folder and began reading every line again, as if preparing for battle. The settler retains the right to revoke residential privileges in the event of personal disrespect or degradation. My lawyer, Mr. Henley, had called it a protective clause. Back then, I'd smiled and told him, "He's my son, not a tenant." But Henley had simply replied, "Love doesn't cancel foresight, Mrs. Mallory." Now I understood. I wasn't using that clause out of revenge. I was using it out of self-respect. Because love that accepts humiliation isn't love, it's surrender. And I'd surrendered long enough. By the time he walked into the kitchen, I had already decided what I needed to do. "Morning," he said casually, scrolling through his phone, his voice the same easy tone he used when he wanted something. "Did we run out of oat milk?" I looked up at him, my voice steady. "There's regular milk in the fridge." He frowned. "That stuff upsets my stomach." "I'll pick some up later," I said quietly. He didn't thank me. He never did anymore. He just grunted something that might have been acknowledgement and wandered away, already half gone in his world of notifications and noise. That moment sealed it for me. It wasn't just what he'd said to his friends, it was what he didn't say to me. The absence of care. The casual entitlement. The slow erasing of my place in the story of his success. After he left for work, I changed into my old gray sweater, the one that smelled faintly of lavender soap, and called Mr. Henley's office. "I'd like to schedule a meeting," I said. My voice didn't shake. "It's regarding the revocation clause in my son's trust deed." "Of course, Mrs. Mallory," the secretary replied softly, as if she could hear the ache behind my words. "Would tomorrow morning work?" "That would be perfect," I said. I spent the rest of the day cleaning, not out of duty, but habit. Wiping countertops, folding sheets, emptying the trash. The house looked spotless by evening, almost too perfect. It no longer felt like mine, but it didn't feel like his either. It was just a place filled with echoes, of laughter, of promises, of the kind of love that doesn't die but learns to stand on its own feet. That night, I packed my suitcase again. This time, not out of guilt, but out of choice. As I zipped it shut, I looked around one last time. The walls were silent witnesses to everything I'd given, and everything I was taking back. My peace, my pride, my voice. Tomorrow I would go to that office. Tomorrow, my silence would have paperwork. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel weak. I felt ready. He came home late the next evening. The sound of his car door closing was sharp, impatient. I had made his favorite dinner, baked pasta with basil and garlic, though I couldn't explain why. Maybe part of me still wanted to see if he'd noticed something more than the food. When he walked in, he smelled it immediately and smiled. "You cooked," he said, setting his keys on the counter. "Smells great." His tone was warm, practiced. The kind of warmth that floats on the surface and never touches the heart. "I thought it'd be nice to sit down and eat together," I said, pulling out a chair. He hesitated for a moment before sitting. We ate mostly in silence. He scrolled through his phone between bites, glancing up now and then like a man waiting for something more interesting to happen. "This is really good," he said finally, his mouth half full. "You should have opened that catering thing you always talked about." I smiled faintly. "I didn't want to work nights when you were young," I said. "Someone had to make sure you ate." He chuckled, eyes still fixed on the glowing screen. "Yeah, guess it all worked out." It didn't. Not really. But I didn't say that. I watched him eat, remembering when he used to tell me about every dream, every friend, every idea. Now I was just another background sound in his life, steady, reliable, invisible. After a while, I said softly, "Can I ask you something?" He looked up, barely curious. "Sure." "Why did you tell your friends I begged to stay here?" He froze, the fork halfway to his mouth. "Mom," he said with a nervous laugh, "you're not still thinking about that, are you?" "I am," I replied quietly. He put the fork down, leaned back, and sighed. "You're overreacting. It was just talk. People joke." "I'm not people," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I'm your mother." He rolled his eyes, frustration flickering in his face. "You're making it a big deal for nothing." I folded my napkin neatly on the table. "You think so?" "Yes," he said sharply. "You're here. I offered you a place to stay. What more do you want?" "Respect," I said simply. The word stopped him. It sat heavy between us, larger than the room itself. "Mom," he started, but I interrupted softly. "You keep saying it's a joke, but every time I tell you something hurts, you tell me I'm being dramatic. You don't hear me anymore. You just correct me." He leaned forward, his voice rising slightly. "You're twisting everything I say. You needed help, I helped. Why can't you just be grateful?" I met his eyes. "Grateful?" I said, almost whispering. "I bought this house, remember? You didn't help me. I helped you." He blinked, like the thought had never truly registered before. Silence stretched out between us. The only sound was the ticking clock on the wall. Finally, he said coldly, "You know what, Mom? Maybe you should go back to your apartment when it's ready. Clearly, this arrangement isn't working." I nodded slowly. "You're right. It's not." I stood, gathered the plates, and walked to the sink. My hands were steady now. Behind me, he stayed seated, staring at his phone, pretending he wasn't shaken. That night, I packed again. Every shirt folded, every item placed perfectly in my small suitcase. I left the spare key on the kitchen counter under a coaster, next to a handwritten note. "I'm leaving a day early. Thank you for your hospitality. Take care of yourself." As I closed the front door quietly behind me, I didn't look back. Sometimes leaving doesn't mean walking away, it means finally choosing yourself. And for the first time in years, I felt lighter. The cab ride to the lawyer's office was silent except for the hum of traffic. I kept my hands folded in my lap, the same way I used to when I took my son to school all those years ago, calm on the outside, but inside, everything trembled. The driver asked if I wanted the radio on, and I shook my head. I didn't need music, I needed clarity. When I arrived, Mr. Henley greeted me with that same gentle professionalism I remembered from the day I'd first signed the papers. His office smelled of lemon polish and paper, clean, precise, controlled. "Mrs. Mallory," he said softly, "I have a feeling this isn't a casual visit." "It's not," I replied. "I want to execute the clause." He didn't act surprised. Instead, he opened the drawer of his desk and pulled out the thick file bearing my son's name. Clause 43, temporary revocation of property access rights in the event of personal disrespect or degradation. He looked up at me. "May I ask what happened?" I told him, not every detail, just enough. The laughter. The mocking. The word guilt. and the quiet way he dismissed me, as if my pain was an inconvenience. Henley listened without interruption. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "You're well within your rights," he said. "The clause allows a 30-day restriction, pending review. Shall I proceed?" "Yes," I said. My voice didn't shake this time. He prepared the paperwork with deliberate precision, reading every line aloud before I signed. "You understand," he said finally, "this doesn't remove his ownership, but it will restrict his ability to occupy or host within the property until you lift the order." "That's enough," I replied. "He needs to remember what ownership means." As the pen pressed against the paper, I felt something strange. Not victory, not satisfaction, but release. Years of swallowed words, of silent tears behind closed doors, of pretending everything was fine, they all seemed to dissolve with each signature. I wasn't punishing my son. I was teaching him the lesson I should have taught long ago. Love without respect is just dependency. Henley looked at me thoughtfully. "You've done what most parents never can, set a boundary." "Boundaries aren't cruelty," I said quietly. "They're self-respect." When I left the office, the city looked different, sharper, clearer. I walked down the block and found a small cafe. Ordered tea. Sat by the window and watched people pass. I wondered if he'd come home yet, if he'd noticed the note I left, if the silence in the house would finally make him realize what he'd lost. The phone buzzed once. His name lit up the screen. I let it ring. Then again. Then again. I didn't pick up. Instead, I opened my wallet and looked at an old photo. Him at 6 years old, grinning, a front tooth missing, his small hand clutching mine. I smiled faintly. That boy, I loved more than my own breath. But the man he became, he needed to learn what that love cost. By evening, I checked into a small motel on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just a clean room with a stiff bed and quiet walls. I unpacked only one bag. The folder stayed on the nightstand beside the lamp. I turned off my phone, not to escape him, but to give both of us space. He would learn soon enough. He'd walk into that house, feel the absence, read the letter from Henley's office, and realize the one thing I had always protected him from: consequences. I wasn't angry anymore. Just certain. Sometimes the only way to make someone grow is to stop shielding them from the weight of what they've broken. And this time, I wasn't shielding him. I was letting him face the silence he created. He called me 23 times over the next 2 days. I didn't answer a single one. Each missed call felt like an echo of all the times I'd been ignored under my own roof. By the third day, the calls stopped. Maybe he was angry. Maybe embarrassed. Or maybe he was finally sitting in that big, empty house, realizing that silence weighs more than any lecture could. When the official notice reached him, the message was short and formal: access temporarily restricted for 30 days pending review. The paper didn't scream or accuse, it simply spoke truth. And truth doesn't need to raise its voice to be heard. That evening, my phone rang again. I almost didn't answer, but something inside me whispered, let him speak. His voice was quieter this time. "Mom," he said, "I get it. I was wrong. I didn't mean to make you feel small." I stayed silent. Sometimes silence teaches better than words. He continued, softer now. "I thought I was proving something by standing on my own, but all I did was forget who built the ground I stand on." His voice broke then. "You don't have to forgive me. Just know that I see it now." I closed my eyes. My heart ached, not from anger, but from love that had waited too long to be respected. "I don't need you to see me," I said finally. "I just need you to see yourself. Because the man I raised knew how to love. I just hope he remembers him." There was a pause, heavy and human. Then he said quietly, "I'm trying." "Good," I whispered. Because this was never about punishment. It was about reflection. When the call ended, I didn't cry. I just sat in the quiet motel room, the hum of the old air conditioner filling the space where pain used to live. I realized something powerful: dignity doesn't need an audience. It only needs courage. Weeks passed. I moved into a small apartment above a flower shop, where the mornings smelled like lavender and coffee. I started reading again, writing again, breathing again. Some nights I get a message from him. Not asking, not defending, just simple things. Thinking of you, Mom. Or, I'm grateful. Slowly, the silence turned into something gentler, understanding. And one day I went back. Not to stay, just to visit. The house was cleaner, quieter. He met me at the door, not with excuses, but with open hands. I've been fixing things, he said. Not the house, me. I smiled. That's all I ever wanted. He nodded, eyes glassy. I don't deserve forgiveness yet. No, I said softly. But you've started earning it. We stood there for a while, saying nothing. Just breathing the same air again, not as mother and child caught in hurt, but as two people learning respect the hard way. When I left that day, I didn't take back the house. I didn't have to. Because the real ownership had finally returned. Not through a deed, not through money, but through humility. As I walked down the street, I whispered to myself, respect can't be gifted. It has to be earned. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like red heart this video and subscribe bell for more powerful stories about love, lessons, and second chances. Speech balloon, tell us in the comments. Do you believe respect is earned or given? Your voice matters, and your story might be the one that helps someone heal today.